Imagine the Gucci, the Rolls Royce, the Louis Vuitton of sketchbooks, one that was custom built with the best materials just for you. A title stamped in gold on the leather cover, the best paper, the best binding, the best everything. Well, let me tell you the story of how I set out to indulge myself with this fantasy of luxurious craziness and the important lessons that I learned from this experience. You know, when I started to draw in a sketchbook, there weren't that many choices in the art store. You could get those black student sketchbooks with a crappy paper in them. You could get exercise books with marble covers. You could get drawing pads with spiral bindings and flimsy covers. Or you could just have some paper and join together with a bulldog clip. I took a few courses in bookbinding so that I could make my own sketchbooks. I made my own covers. I stamped titles in gold foil. I even rebound an old adventure novel from the 1930s into a sketchbook. I didn't know much about paper, so I just used regular old Bristol from pads. It was fine for drawing, but it kind of buckled and warped a bit when I got into watercolor. I was kind of a dreadful bookbinder. I was too sloppy, I was impatient, I was hasty, I couldn't cut a straight line, and my books had this kind of wonky, uneven pages and lumpy, dried glue on them, and a blood stain here or there from slicing my finger along with the book boards. Eventually, I just sewed a pile of pages together, and I never got around to making proper covers. Now, the last mortifying step in my declining standards brought me to Kinko's to have a stack of paper spiral bound into a book. One day, I got a larger than expected Christmas bonus at work, and I decided to take some of it and splurge on something ridiculous and self-indulgent. I was nearing the end of my 44th sketchbook, so I decided I'd earned a new next-level sketchbook. I found Shmuel, a wonderful old-school bookbinder who had a long beard and glue-stained black suit. And he and various kerchiefed and yarmulked relatives worked in a dingy Lower East Side basement store where they bound Bibles and prayer books in leather with gold-edged pages. So this specialty seemed appropriate for my project, so I hired him to make me the best sketchbook I could imagine. First of all, I wanted really good watercolor paper, thick, heavy, French. So I bought a few blocks of Arches Aquarelle. I also wanted some variety, so I bought some really good toned drawing paper in various shades, and I added that to my stack. And I asked Shmuel to mix the papers randomly so that I'd get a surprise when I turned the pages. Next, we picked out some bright red leather for the cover, and I asked him to stamp the cover and spine with a gold 45. A few weeks later, I returned to Moshe's bindery, and he unwrapped his masterpiece. I was stunned. It was gorgeous, breathtaking, and also huge. It belonged in a museum. So I dragged this sketchbook home, and I sat on my desk for a while. I was kind of afraid to ruin it with one of my drawings. Maybe you know the feeling. Well, while number 45 is indisputably the creme de la creme of sketchbooks, it turned out not to be for me. In fact, I barely managed to fill half its pages. It was like eating a stack of chocolate eclairs stuffed into a red velvet cake, resting in a huge fudge sundae. It was my midlife crisis sketchbook. First of all, the book is just too big and heavy. I could barely stuff it into my sketching bag, so I tended to leave it at home. It was also so ostentatious. I mean, because I couldn't get it into my bag, I had to awkwardly walk down the street with it under my arm. I went to a sketch crawl and a couple of life drawing classes, and I felt like a right popinjay, as over the top as if I'd shown up in white tie and tails and a top hat. I discovered that 300-gram Arches paper isn't really ideal for the sort of work that I do. This heavy grain paper was hard to write and draw on with a small point fine liner, which is what I used at the time. And I was relieved when I turned the page and I found, I've got to the toned drawing paper finally. Despite all these misgivings, I learned a lot from number 45. First, I prefer Bristol and mixed media paper to heavy, bumpy, expensive paper. I needed flexibility because I never know what I'm going to want to draw and what materials I'll use. So the kind of big sheets of heavy, super textured watercolor paper That's not what I do. Second, a sketchbook is like a pair of shoes. It has to be appropriate for what you're doing. It has to fit you properly. It has to be comfy. Don't wear Louboutin stilettos to the gym, if you know what I mean. And of course, it doesn't matter what other people think. Fine, I'm ostentatious. I've got my top hat and my red sketchbook, but anyway, who cares? But working with Shmuel on this masterpiece wasn't a waste of money. It's okay to indulge yourself with great art supplies so long as you use them. And if you've given it a valiant try, there's no shame in admitting the tool isn't working for you and moving on to something more appropriate. Like most things in life, the best advice is be true to yourself. And remember, it's not the sketchbook that matters. It's the art that you make in it and how you feel about it when you do. I hope you found this helpful. And if you did, sign up for my free essays. I'll send you great advice like this every week. And subscribe to this channel. I put out new videos every week. And next, watch this.